the older I got, it floored me that like there's less people that have those connections that met Eddie Cochran or Buddy Holly. And Duane was one of those people that was there. And, so yes, I would absolutely ask, multiple times I've heard him talk about being in New York City and trying to find good Mexican food with Eddie Cochran and Richie Valens. So I have this mental image of that trio in New York City looking for a Mexican restaurant, and
in
1958, 59, right? And being kids, all being kids, yeah. And I remember him talking about Duane was getting ready to go on stage, and somebody had snipped all 6 strings in his guitar.
Wow.
And he said it was Eddie Cochran. But I don't know.
Would that be a mean prank, or would that be a laughing, thinking he'd think it was funny? Or?
Yeah, Duane was laughing about it.
Yeah.
He was laughing. But so few people have built a career on being an instrumentalist, and he did that just hit after hit after hit. He had a fan club called the Duane Eddy Circle of Friends. It had a U.S. chapter and a UK chapter, and my father was a big part of the US chapter, and so through that he grew up as a massive fan of Duane's. Duane always said it's a circle of friends, it's not a fan club. It was a fan club, but it was true, it was a circle of friends.
You remember the first time you met him?
Yeah, so my father had gotten together with him in Los Angeles, and I remember he was really excited. He's meeting his hero, and he came back, and it was a great experience. You know how that can be, meeting your heroes. So he comes home, and I remember him raving about we went to Hal Blaine's house. And Hal Blaine at the time was living in this big mansion and had this really swanky place, and that was, really big deal. And so we came down to Nashville and got together with them. We had a couple from England that were with us that were over here on vacation. I remember Duane was excited because he had gotten a pedal steel guitar, and he loved George Jones. And we ate dinner, and we went up in the music room, and he put on a George Jones record, and he sat down at the steel and he started playing pedal steel. And I'm thinking in the moment, this is amazing. I mean, and looking back on it, how many people got to see Duane Eddy play pedal steel?
I had no idea that he played pedal steel.
Yeah, he was sitting there. He was playing, this particular George Jones. And I think it was Buddy Emmons licks he was learning. And but it was so neat to see him be excited, and it was like seeing him be a little kid. He's working on this pedal steel licks. And I remember going to a guitar store with him, and we're in this guitar store, and he would pick up a guitar, and he liked Chet, finger picking, playing like Chet. And he would pick up and play a song.
Like the Merle Travis type stuff?
Yeah, thumb picking, yeah. And people in the store would just kind of gravitate to him. It was just, they wouldn't know who he was necessarily. I mean, some of them might, but he could be pretty anonymous. He could walk, it's this guy, he's playing, but he would gather this little crowd around. And then he'd hand the guitar to me, and I'm a teenager holding the guitar, just feeling like, I'm trying to play something as quick as I could. Here you go. And, everybody's looking, and everybody's kind of standing around like, well, who's this kid, And, but he was, like I said, super encouraging and really great experience with that where again, meeting your heroes. He was my father's hero. But over the years, he became my hero. And there was a time then, maybe a year or two later, where Duane and Dee were driving up north, and they said, we're coming through Indiana where we were living, and we want to pop in. Is it okay if we stop by? And so Duane and Dee came to our house for, an afternoon and an evening. I don't think they stayed over. I think they just...
In Lafayette, Indiana.
In West Lafayette, Indiana.
Wow.
And Duane had just done a deal with Chevy trucks. He had a TV commercial. It was about 87 or so. It was after the Art of Noise had done Peter Gunn, so he was kind of back on the scene. And Chevy had him do a commercial, and it was a big deal that the World Series that year, that ad was running on the World Series games. So I remember that being a thing. And I remember friends of mine at school were, that was kind of on the radar suddenly, like, isn't that guitar player that you've always talked about? Because as a little kid, nobody knew who Duane Eddy was. My grade school friends, I kind of grew up thinking, well, everybody knows Duane Eddy, right? And, my friends would be like, I don't know who that is, who's that? So then the Art of Noise things happens. That was about 86. The reason I brought up the TV commercial was Duane indeed showed up at our house in this brand new Chevy pickup, tricked out truck. It was big and fancy. And it was like, yeah, they gave us, this truck as part of the deal for doing the commercials. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a sweet deal,
This guitar thing might not be half bad.
Yeah, it worked out for him. And so that was a big deal for him to come to our house. And just, again, in small town Indiana, there's Duane Eddy. Yeah. And so that was neat. So again, when I grew up and finished school and moved to Nashville, I reached out to them, and BR 549 was happening. That I joined this band playing upright bass. I wasn't playing guitar, I was playing upright bass. And I told them about it, that we were playing in this little club on Broadway. And Duane said, BR 549, 3 people have told me about this in the last few days, that I need to go see this band. And I was laughing, like I felt, wow, some validation, like, really? Okay, great. And he goes, you're in that band? Yeah. And he said, okay, we're coming. And so Duane indeed came to Roberts, and they walked in, and my favorite memory is Duane was a country music fan growing up. I think we all think of him as a rock star, but Hank Sr., Hank Snow, Jimmy Rogers, like that's his sweet spot. He grew up loving that stuff. When Elvis came along, he was like swept up in that too and appreciated that and loved it, but he really loved the early country stuff. So we're playing this early country stuff. And I look down at the table in front of the stage, and we're playing, Chuck is singing, I think Waiting on a Train, the Jimmy Rogers song. And Duane's just he's just grinning, he's got his head back, and he's like playing air rhythm guitar along with us. And I'm so in the moment of translating or going through that in my brain of like how many people have, myself included, like played a tennis racket in their bedroom to a Duane Eddy record. And here he is, like playing air guitar, because again, it was his childhood sweet spot of music, and he was in heaven, and so that made me feel good.
That had to feel great.
Yeah. And so, I remember feeling like, wow, I kind of felt like we were jamming with Duane Eddy. He was not playing an instrument, but I did have a full circle moment. Max Weinberg on Conan O'Brien, when they're going to break, they would, play little snippets of songs. And that's where you would hear Duane Eddy songs occasionally in those kind of situations, little blurbs of things, or in the background on traffic reports. You occasionally you're like, hey, that's Duane Eddy, and it's in the background of things, whatever. Max Weinberg 7 did Because They're Young on Conan's show a few times. I would catch that a few times. And you hear that song a couple different times, you start realizing like, oh, there's something, after you hear it 3 times, you go, oh, there's some reason, like he likes that song, right? So when we were a guest on Conan O'Brien's show, I got with the band earlier and I said, can you guys do Because They're Young? And Max just was like, yes. Like, it was almost like an excuse to play Because They're Young, yeah. And so right before we went on, they did that song. And so like in the break before we played, they played Because They're Young. And I ran into Duane shortly after that, and Duane said, I saw you guys on Conan, you guys did great. And I said, did you hear what song they played? He said, yeah. He said, I wondered if you had something to do with that. Yes. Years later, I'm working at the Musicians Hall of Fame. I always talked about how Duane was great with his fans, and a lot of times if somebody was coming from overseas to do an interview or a TV thing, they would use our place because we had an exhibit of his. And so he would kind of use that as a base for interviews and those kind of things. A lot of artists did that. And a friend of Duane's wanted his brother to meet Duane. So they had it arranged that it was going to be a surprise. Duane was there. This guy was bringing his brother to the museum. They were just going to happen to be, oh, here's Duane Eddy, you know. So Duane called and asked if the schedule was clear and that was doable, and we set it all up and told me the situation. We had it all worked out. And there was an interactive section in the Musicians Hall of Fame, the Grammy Gallery, where you can play drum set, keyboards, guitar, bass. And we got to that section, and it just happened. Duane picked up the Strat, I picked up the bass, the guy jumped on drums, and we started playing. And now if I knew this was going to happen, I would have had a nice Gretsch set up for him. You know, I would have set it up for him. It was just the Strat. It was a nice Strat, you know. He played a song, and I was in heaven. You know, I'm playing with Duane Eddy. And again, it's through headphones, but he's gathering a crowd, just like normal, of museum goers, and suddenly there's like 12 people around, and he plays a song. And what I noticed was when he played the Strat, it sounded like Duane Eddy. When I play a Strat, it sounds like I'm playing a Strat. He played a Strat, and I was like, whoa, it's in his fingers. It's not, you know. Yeah. He had a Duane Eddy model guitar, and he had typically played a Gretsch, Chet Atkins guitar, actually. But he finishes the song, and I'm thinking, what a thrill, that's great. And he's like, all right, let's go in, and he goes into another song. And he played about 14 tunes. Like, we had this little concert, and luckily I knew the bass parts, and I was able to hang. And again, suddenly there's like 100 people gathered around this big crowd. And so that was a full circle moment, like where the bit where he was air guitaring in Roberts, and I felt like we were jamming it. Like suddenly, oh, I did get to jam with Duane Eddy, and it was the beautiful thing was it was organic. It wasn't planned or it just happened, and it was amazing. And that's another thing that when he would be on TNN or being on the Nashville Now or those shows. That was the thing, he had this big heavy guitar amp that he would be, showing up and it'd be in his truck. And so if I could be there, I was there to help him. Like, let me get that amp and let me put the amp, and he was really, really grateful for that.
Was it like a twin or something?
It was something heavy. A Standell, maybe. Maybe.
They make those way heavier than they used to.
Gosh. Exactly. They are getting heavier, yeah. And again, as I get older, I see it now. I was in my 20s, in my 30s, showing up, happy to help lift this amp or whatever. And looking at it now, as Duane was in his 60s and 70s. Yeah, kid, get that amp. Yes, please. I think about Chet Atkins that way, Merle Travis that way, where they made a name for themselves as the guitar guy. And people that showed up from all over to see their, guitar hero play a concert. But you can't phone it in. They had to, they got to be on. And I'll speak for both of us. As we get older.
Hey, what?
But I've gone through that thing of like, it's one thing, if you have Duane has a hit when he's 19. He has hit after hit after hit, but he's, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So then being 50 years old and people like you and me are showing up to see him play a concert, which, he's got to be on and not let them down. And he never did let them down. He was always on and had a touch. And I noticed how he didn't phone it in. He was all in when he performed, and I didn't even see him live that many times, maybe 10 times through the years. But
this reminds me of you telling me about him signing things for people, and how he was always willing to do that.
Yeah. So my friends would hit me up, hey, can you get Duane? Like the next time you see Duane, could you get me to sign this? Get him to sign this. I knew how much that meant to me if I could get somebody's autograph, and and I knew what it meant to these people. So I would typically, trouble Duane with, hey, would you sign this? And he always did. A certain time passed where it kind of built up. There was like a pretty good sized pile of stuff, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and I felt really bad about it. Like, hey, Duane, great to see you again. Here's a mountain of stuff. It was pick guards and albums and 45s and just, photos, just different things people had that they wanted to get signed. And Duane knew that I wasn't hoarding stuff to sell it. He understood that. But I still was hesitant to thrust this stuff on him, and he even looked at it like, wow, that's a lot of stuff, and I apologized for it, and he stopped and looked at me. He said, no, I'm happy to, I'm happy to do this, and anything, for your friends or whatever, and it just made it all the tension released. Like, oh, okay, I was worried about it, and he was easing my mind. And he did, and every time since then, he would always do that, and appreciated his fans. And what I loved watching him interact with these people, like I said, at the museum, where he would be doing these interviews or meeting these fans, or people that randomly were coming through the museum that crossed paths with him. Two things come to mind. He would always want to hear their story. People wanted to hear him talk, but he wanted to, tell me where you're from, what do you do, and what. And the other thing that was fascinating was these people would be like, well, you wouldn't remember this, but I met you in the parking lot in Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1959. And, and Duane, I'd see it happen where Duane would be like, wait, yeah. And the first time I'm thinking, he doesn't remember that. Of course he doesn't remember that. And the guy he's talking to I'm seeing him like, you don't remember. And then Duane would say something that would be like, and Duane was like, I was eating a hot dog, right? And the guy was like, yes, something so minute, but like would tip it off that he did remember, and those things happened. And so that was amazing to witness. And again, about the thing about meeting your heroes and being disappointed, I never had that fear. Those fears were put to rest early on for me. And then when I saw that with other people, people would be nervous about meeting Duane, and I was always able to say, no, you don't have to be nervous. It's going to be great, And they'd still be nervous, but I didn't have to tiptoe around it, like, how's he going to be? Yeah. Like some people I have had to do that with. And it's life. That's life. Yeah, it's life. So I was really spoiled in that regard, that he was so gracious and kind and humble.
He had a star on a Nashville Walk of Fame. Mm-hmm. And I seem to remember you saying something about it was important to him that your parents might be able to make it to that.
Yeah, so when they announced that he was getting the star, Dee reached out to me, and she said, I really want your folks to, can your folks be there? And
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And I wanted to say, like, are you kidding? Like, of course they're going to be there. Yes, we will all be there, But yeah, they did. They really. I think that's where I always had that feeling of like they looked after me like a kid, like one of their own. I always felt that. Like they were always. And then as I got older, they wanted to know what my kids were doing, and every time we, that they would be involved. And I had a really sweet moment. Les Paul would have been 100 years old. And the Les Paul Foundation came to Nashville, and Duane performed. So my son, who was probably about 11 years old at the time, had a baseball game. And so I was at the baseball game, and I left the game. We jumped in the car, like I got, after the coach talked to the kids, he's done. Drake and I jump in the car, beeline to the park where Duane was playing. And Duane was just going on stage. We cut it close, but we got there. And my parents were at the baseball game and did the same thing. Got to the park, did the show, and then after the show, Duane and Dee called us over, the kind of the backstage area, and really they wanted to talk to Drake, my son, and he was in his baseball uniform, so they were talking all about that, and I remember that. It hit me that I was about Drake's age when I met them, and now it's happening to Drake. And I was like, and now Drake's a Duane Eddy fan. And that was, again, a full circle kind of thing. But yeah, they were just really down to earth and interested in what was going on, and I really felt that all along. That's been a through point to all of this. So, and Deed, and I can't say enough about Deed. His wife really kept him on task, and helped him along with professionally and setting up things and kind of being an organizer. He not that he wasn't organized, but she always would be looking after him and was always there, and that was a really big part of it that I feel like the people that know, but to most people they wouldn't know that she was so involved with everything. So she was a huge part of it, and they'd been together ever since I knew them. I think they got together in the 70s.
Do you remember the last interaction you had with him?
I went out to his house, and he was all there, told stories, and I write for Now Dig This out of England, and I really wanted to get him to like a listening feature, where he, let's listen to your first album and get your memories that come from each song, like just kind of a stream of consciousness thing. And I kind of proposed that, and he said, yeah, of course we'll do that, and it never came to be. But he was, like I said, all there, remembering things, and some of the stories I'd heard before, but I want to hear them again. But they weren't, they weren't going all over the place. He was all there, and that was.
You were nice enough. Like a couple times, I would be in the same place where he was, and you were nice enough to hey, would you like to meet Duane Eddy? And what the hell am I gonna say? But I just say hi. It's beautiful to meet you. And he was so in that moment, talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to be talking to me. Even Dee, she doesn't know me, but they were both so nice, and I'm always the first person to cut that off and just not bother people, because I assume I'm bothering everyone at every moment of the day. But they were so nice and so in that moment, and it just, not everybody's that way.
Yeah, and that's why I was always like, come meet Duane Eddy.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have any fear of that, because I'm not going to pull you over to meet everybody, because it's not always that way.
Yeah.
But again, I knew you'd appreciate it, and Duane, like you say, was in the moment, and he wasn't just like, yeah, nice to meet you, and off to the next person. It never felt that way.
We've all had that.
Yeah, and that's understandable too. Like,
right.
It's a room full of people, and you're another guy. Yeah, you got my records.
And you're really trying to make it to the bathroom.
Right. And I've talked to a lot of people that way. That, he did a signing at the Country Music Hall of Fame, and where he was signing posters for people. And again, they limit it. Like, he'll sign 2 things for you or whatever, and he's fine with that. But I've talked to the people that went through that line, and again, they were like, hey, while we had our 2 minutes, he was all there. Like we were the only people that mattered in that 2 minutes, and that that speaks volumes, because
and he was in his 70s or 80s at this point.
Yeah. Another thing of that Country Music Hall of Fame, it was the Nashville Cats. They kind of did an overview of his career, and he played some and interviewed and then did the signing. But he had maybe 3 guitars, like a 6-string bass and 2 guitars on stage there. And I remember him having me and my dad and him carry a guitar out. Like, I helped him with the amp, and then that was a neat moment to be with my dad and Duane and have being his roadies for whatever that. Not that we even carried the guitars that far, but that was a nice moment, And I could see it through the eyes of my father that, again, he grew up from his formative years loving Duane Eddy, but just those are just records. It wasn't a personal thing, and then it became a personal thing. Then I grew up, and it was a personal thing. And my kids know of him, so that was a neat moment to.
if we could leave people with, since you're aware of some deep cuts that might not be so obvious, that might even be on Spotify or something like that, that people might want to dig up to hear Duane's.
Well, I've always said that Duane Eddy's music is so varied and wide, style-wise. So the twangy guitar is the theme, but that's the thing that runs through it. But because of that, he's got these, okay, let's put the twangy guitar in the Hawaiian setting. Let's put the twangy guitar in the country setting. Let's put the twangy guitar in the lush string orchestration setting. Let's put the twangy guitar in the garage rock setting. Let's put the twangy guitar and do Bob Dylan songs. That's the thing of, it's such a wide range through the years of material. Memories of Madrid is one to check out. It's on twangy guitar, silky strings. It's a simple guitar line, and it's unique and really interesting it's an orchestrated thing, but it's not heavy orchestra. And I really enjoy that, Memories of Madrid. There's an album he did called Tokyo Hits, and I kind of grew up thinking, it's just a Japan collection of his hits. Then I find out, no, it's hits that were popular in Japan in 1968, and he did his take on these Japanese pop songs. And
that's a really interesting idea.
It is. And so it seems like most of the album is just more rock ensemble instrumentation, but it's these songs that were popular at the time. So Ginza Lights is one of those that the Ventures also did. They were also big in Japan. So that's one that comes to mind, those Tokyo hits. The first album that had, Rebel Rouser and Moving and Grooving and, had the big hits, the big breakthrough, is just such a classic rock and roll album. When you listen to that, it's just, it comes off like it's five guys in a garage playing. And it's just got this huge sound. It's done in Phoenix there. And these musicians had it dialed in from that first album. They'd been working on other projects. Duane was kind of this part of this kind of collective that Lee Hazelwood was kind of gathering, and Al Casey was involved with that too. And Duane, they kind of got this sound dialed in, and Al Casey put out some releases, and Duane Eddy put out some releases, and the Duane one kind of clicked. And so that became, okay, well, now we need a follow-up, and it clicked, and then, the follow-up was Rebel Rouser, and it was bigger, and, so that thing kind of grew out of that. But, so, I'm partial to that first album, because they really were onto it from the beginning there. And then it was kind of like they played off of that success for years. He had more hits for a while, and then he went to RCA, and came to Nashville and did a record, and, I'm blown away by the talent of the musicians on his records. He was got the A-Team in Nashville that he was a big fan of their stuff and wanted to make a record with them. So I know he was excited about that. And then he's working with Wrecking Crew guys. So the Wrecking Crew guys he was kind of a farm team situation, if that's the way to say it. Some of the early guys in Duane's band kind of ended up in the Wrecking Crew. Steve Douglas on sax and Larry Knechtel on keyboards, bass. Those guys got their start in his band. Jim Horn playing sax too would end up being a big part of that Wrecking Crew scene and on so many of those hits. And it's like they all went back to Duane's band, the Rebels.
Well, man, I appreciate you sharing this moment and your experiences with us. I know this isn't easy. It's I swear that I texted you like 4 minutes after I heard about Duane. I didn't. I've been completely off the grid, and then of course Jay's like, yeah, I'd love to, man. Let's talk about it. So.
Yeah. Well, I like I said, the news hit hard, but every time we lose somebody like that, it's seeing the reaction on social media, you know, the memories that flood out from people, and all the, you know, you see how many people he affected, and I mean, you know, his music has touched, and so there's something to be said about that. It's, you know, he reached a lot of people, and yeah, it's a tough one to lose, but I love that we can still put his music on. We can still hear his music.
Oh, yeah. Go listen to some Duane Eddy, folks.
Turn it up.
And I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.